Welcome to the Small Town Podcast. This is Season 2. I'm Monica Lacey, and I'll be your host for some engaging discussions with artists working in contemporary art in Prince Edward Island. Each episode focuses on a different medium, and I bring two artists into conversation around it and their process. This town is small as PEI's only artist-run center, incorporated in 2010, and we are dedicated to helping foster sustainability for contemporary arts practice in this province. This project is made possible via the support of Innovation PEI through the PEI Culture Action Plan. We recorded these sessions on traditional unceded Mi'kMaq territory. Big thank you to Devin Ross at Thin Slice Media for the sound recording, editing, and music. For more information on each of the artists I speak with, please see the show notes for each episode. This episode focuses on painting, as I talk with Daniel MacDougall and Norma Maclean, two artists I was lucky to have as my studio mates at the time of recording. And we talk about methodology, materials, and why we make our art. So to get started, I'm going to ask you just to introduce yourself, if you want to say anything about where you're based in geography, and a bit about your practice, like if you want to, yeah.
Sure, I'll start. Okay, Norma Maclean, and I'm based, I have a studio in Charlottetown and a kind of makeshift home studio in Murray Harbour, which is where I live. And painting is probably my main medium, but also installation and performance-based work. So it's like a quick overview.
Yeah, my name's Daniel. I'm based in Charlottetown. I have a studio at the Vessel as well, where my art practice is based out of. It's mostly painting, drawing. I've done some video, performance, and sculpture installation in the past, but I'd say, yeah, my main practice at the moment is drawing and painting.
Awesome, thank you. So I wanted to ask you both, what has your journey as an artist been like? Like, where did it start? What has the trajectory been that led you to the work that you're making now?
Okay, I'll start with that one. I grew up in O'Leary, Prince Edward Island. My father was a conservation officer, so I spent a lot of time traveling with him while he would go to work, and he was into photography. We're talking like 35 millimeter kind of analog photography. So he introduced me to that. So I started taking pictures, going to kind of bird colonies, taking pictures of a lot of birds, cormorants, seagulls, and any other various animals we would come across. I feel like that too, to jump ahead to my practice today, we see a lot of birds in my work, and I feel like it does kind of come from those memories. So yeah, I was introduced to photography. Kind of through that, kind of moving to high school, I got interested in kind of video, film, started working a lot with like Super 8 camera, Super 8 film. Went to art school with intention, kind of studying kind of film, video, performance. But through studying and the foundation course, I had to take a drawing class. And through that drawing class, I immediately kind of fell in love with it and couldn't stop drawing. So I had really no prior kind of trained experience of drawing until I went to art school and kind of made the shift from video, kind of film, into kind of more fine art. And then painting seemed like the next logical step after the drawing.
And then you've stayed with that medium, those
pretty much.
since.
I've played around with some film and video projects as well, but yeah.
And do you find there's a correlation from what you wanted to express through film and video? Is it coming through in your painting and drawing, or is it something altogether different that is coming out?
No, I think definitely there's a lot of correlations there, and sometimes I feel like my drawings could actually be films. But I'm very happy with them being drawings. It's much faster and maybe no technical headaches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
But I feel like I definitely will explore that in the future at some point again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I look forward to seeing how that plays out. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about your journey?
So I grew up in Bloomfield,
Oh, yeah.
which is very close to
Yeah.
O'Leary. But I wouldn't say I didn't have a lot of artistic influences when I was growing up or exposure necessarily. Like, I don't think I set foot in an art gallery till, I don't even think it was when I was doing my first degree. Like, it was a surprising amount of time. Like, musicals, yes, and movies, but not like visual art, not painting. Just like, I feel like what every kid does, kind of like drawing and painting to that extent. And I did take some art in high school, but my first degree and my first interests were all science-based. So I did biology and physics degree, and that was like my trajectory was definitely science-based. And then a few plans fell through, and it's like almost like it felt like last minute to apply to art school, but I did, and I got in, and I just thought, well, this must be what I should be my next step. So I went to art school, and then that's where just the exposure to everything, right? Like people that had known art since they were kids, people that were like me and just had entered. So it was a mix of people and just so many different mediums in the foundation course. And my first love was printmaking, lithography printmaking, and I loved it. And I took all the courses to get to like advanced, and this is my thing. And then I thought, I'm not gonna have there's no time I'm gonna have on PEI access to a litho stone and a press. And I was like, I've got to find another way to like be making work that isn't just printmaking. I need like a backup. And then I just started taking painting courses. I had actively avoided painting because I had done like some pretty amateur painting in high school, and I was like, whatever. I kind of was like, no, that's not my thing. I want to do something like way different. And when I started taking the painting courses, I was like, oh, I should probably keep doing this for a little while. So it was like a slow, reluctant, meandering path that led to painting. But I like where I am now. And then the installation and the performance work is all kind of based on like just things that I felt like painting wasn't quite active enough to express. But I'm very happy with painting as a medium and drawing and like those steps that it takes to get to painting. I like that process of working up to a final painting. And sometimes that involves performance, or sometimes I feel like it involves installation. Yeah.
I was just going to ask if the scientist in you is finding some satisfaction
Definitely.
in the art practice too?
Anytime I can come up with like a process that has steps that I can repeat, even if it doesn't produce the same product, there's something in me that's just like ding, ding, ding. I love this.
Oh, wow. That's
so,
neat.
yeah, I'm definitely drawn to things that have, I like creating rules and limitations to like bring me to the final. I think that's like the scientific, probably,
Yeah, using that methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that about your background, the science background, but now
I still love science.
I can feel it in your work. There's a precision in there and a methodical process that comes through.
Yeah, it's got to be influenced by that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wanted to ask you a bit about your installation and performance work, and is there does I guess similar to what I asked Daniel, does what gets expressed kind of trickle through both, or is it a really different stream altogether?
I feel like they influence each other. Like I find the imagery I'm using in some of the performances or the installation is also in the painting. And it's just like a way to explore maybe things that I'm interested in, or like that seem to have like I'm attracted to, whether it's just like aesthetically originally or if it has like a personal significance. It's just a way to like kind of really spend time with it. You really spend time with it when you're painting, and then you really spend time kind of with it or doing it or whatever it is in the performance. So,
and have you done have you taken kind of one topic or one idea and explored it through both of those processes?
I think I've done that inadvertently. I don't know if I consciously meant to. Sometimes when I look back, I'm like, oh, like the piece I did for Art in the Open this year is just using like so many things, like images that I used like way back in art school, but also like I've been painting piles for like the past 3 years. I was like, why am I doing this? And then all of a sudden I'm like shuffling into a pile, and I'm making this guy like make a pile for me to then reverse it. So I feel like it's all connected, and I'm still figuring out why I keep being drawn to this, or
that was the project I was wondering about, because you have done all these paintings of sort of piles of snow and piles of
there's like a cycle to them that's just so appealing, because you see the snow build up, then it melts, or you see the sand, like they bring it all in for the winter, then they slowly pick away at it as they need to like spread it somewhere. I don't know, there's something about the cycles I really
so it was interesting to see you performing with the pile, like having seen those like paintings over the years.
You're painting it, spending time with it, but then like you're in it, you're in the pile.
You're in the painting then. I think of sort of creativity as sort of this pool that, you dip into and you sort of catch the fish out of it. As one analogy for it. And I just wondered, is your lens, like that you approach that pool, is it visual, or does it actually come through another way first? For instance, I work with visual art, but my sketchbook, I write everything. Like everything comes through in words first, and then I translate it. And I just wondered what that's like for you.
Yeah, I think for myself sometimes it's both. I love how whatever you do and kind of whatever you're interested in kind of informs kind of the world around you and the way you see it. When I used to skateboard, my world was about like curbs and sidewalks. So whenever I drove into a new town, I'd be looking at the streets and the sidewalks, the concrete, the staircases, and potential places to skateboard. I feel like as an artist, what's great is it allows everything to kind of become potential and interesting, and the possibilities for projects there or ideas through that kind of visual lens that you're talking about.
So when you get inspired, you get an image, or do you hear
sometimes,
it? Or?
Sometimes, definitely. I brought some examples of my work, and I'll probably show you that in a bit, and we'll kind of probably explain more of how my process of thinking. I'm kind of the opposite. I think I try not to put any boundaries on myself. I kind of keep everything very open to kind of any possibilities that could happen. That's kind of what I'm interested in. My practice feels like more kind of about discovery. I can have certain kind of questions, but I don't mind going off into like tangents and other areas or ever finding answers.
Well, I think that's really interesting that we like an opposite approach to creating, because I think I'm probably really personal, but I love it when people can do what you're describing you're doing, because that's like overwhelming to me. So like endless possibilities like makes me I'd never be able to start, but I love that people can do that, because I think that's so freeing. Maybe someday I'll get there. I feel like in a similar way it is probably mostly visual. I feel like I also am just constantly observing and like picking out I feel like I'm always looking at just like little practical setups, visual setups that are occurring around me, and how they aesthetically could be represented in my work. Yeah, because I feel like anything that's done just for the practicality and I feel like that there's an aesthetic to that all on its own that I'm always attracted to. So I feel like most things are visual observations that I am sketching and taking note of. And I do write notes about them, or notes about colors or things that are around, or times of day. And then there's probably other influences just from other art forms that are more subconscious, like things I'm listening to, things I'm reading, or things I'm watching, but probably mostly visual ones.
So here's a question. When that's the case and you are just noticing and making observations, are you always working?
No, I feel like I just kind of check in, and I'm like, oh, and I grab it, and then I check. Like I don't, it doesn't feel like work.
So you're able to
I think if I was
it.
actively looking for it, I'd probably never be picking up as much as if I'm just letting it.
I wrote a list today,
Yeah, is it about
It's
process?
a list of just walking from my house to the studio and just writing the things that I kind of see of interest. And I feel like I do this. Oftentimes I'll make a note on my phone, or it might be a mental note, may forget about it, and then be reminded of seeing something similar later. But I thought, like, in terms of inspiration, and just like remaining open to kind of ideas and possibilities. I think that's important part of my process. So I'd like to kind of read through the list.
Yeah,
That's okay.
please.
And I think you'll see kind of similarities in kind of what I'm attracted to. I think I could explain more with each one, but I think I'll just kind of read through the list. So a snail, a crab apple rotting on the road, a cigarette butt, sand on sidewalk manipulated by tiny hands, ant hills, broken plastic lawn chair, a tea bag, a red straw, one scratched lens from a pair of sunglasses, a white butterfly, a broken piece of wood in broken star-like shape, another red straw, this one is dirtier, the possibility that the man with the matte black motorcycle is dangerous, the gaps between sidewalk slabs, lace curtains, a birdhouse, a yellow butterfly, a man on the bench with no teeth pointing at me, telling me I shouldn't be wearing shorts because it's a cold day, orange hose pipe coiled on green grass, a volleyball being used as a soccer ball, a cat looking at me disapprovingly, a medical mask blowing in the grass, scaffolding in front of a house, where the light kind of meets the shade of a shadow. There's this area of unfocused boundary. Abandoned lot with a pile of red dirt, broken black asphalt, and gray concrete slabbing. That one's probably for you. Walking under a tree filled with chattering starlings. Restricted sidewalk access and negotiating a new path. Neon red with a teal jacket over top. Graffiti marks left by city construction workers. Helping a lady lift a coffee table into her car and being pat on the shoulder and told I've done a good deed for the day. So that's about like a half-hour walk. There was a lot more that I probably could have added, but I feel just by like taking in the world around you, there's so much there. And there's probably kind of an eternity of projects there just from taking one thing.
Yeah.
I could never stay focused that long to do something like that. But I just feel by looking at the world around us, there is like so much kind of inspiration. There's so much there to take.
Yeah. Well, and then even that list becomes sort of its own piece of art because it's so rich with imagery and with setting and narrative and yeah.
And then so I go back to the studio and can think of one of these ideas, and they become memories, but they also become kind of fed into other ideas that I'm thinking of. Is a lot at the moment I'm thinking about kind of queer bodies, and I'll talk about that probably more later.
Is that often how you would work? Sort of, be out in the world noticing, and then go to the studio and just let it come through? Yeah, I work
like that, but again, I try not to. I'm very open to the way I work as well, and it always feels like I can shift and be in flux, because I just don't want. I kind of don't want those boundaries we were talking about earlier. I think I work better if I kind of don't have anything, and there's just possibility, like endless possibility. The downside is I probably create too much, and too much that isn't good. And I accumulate a lot, like I do thousands of drawings.
Yeah. So your process kind of is about open-ended possibilities.
Yeah.
And so when you go to the studio and you're going to do your studio practice for the day, is it different every time? Like the way that you work?
It feels like it can be. Yeah. Definitely. This is kind of what I'm working on now, and I know we were talking about materials. I think I work best when I'm working with either like thrifted kind of materials. A lot of my paints, pencil crayons, pens, they'll come from thrift stores. The paper, these are done on, so what I'm putting on the table are bookmarks found at a thrift store that I've used.
Well, they're fantastic.
I've used colored pencils I bought at the thrift store on these kind of bookmarks. And the bookmarks are kind of pastel-y, kind of, maybe you'd find them in an impressionist painting kind of thing, kind of those pastel purples, pinks, yellows, things like that.
And so these characters that we're seeing on the bookmarks, so they're on the bookmarks, there's a variety of characters made up of different shapes and sort of human-like, but not totally. And just to describe them for the listeners.
So yeah, they're kind of like these fleshed out stick figures. And what I'm thinking about with these, I feel like, is again like queer bodies. And I don't know exactly what that is, but I feel like it's what I'm trying to discover. For me, it feels like it's becoming about kind of contrasts between kind of straight forms mixed with like more organic forms, colorful, maybe excessive emotion. The unicorns are probably more from, I just read Peter S. Beagle's The Last Unicorn. So what you were talking about earlier, Norma, about like books and your reading kind of influencing what you're doing as well.
Have you seen the film?
Yeah, I saw the film way back.
Childhood favorite.
But I had never read the novel, so I just recently went back to it.
Yeah, there's really a variety of emotion in the characters. You know, some of them are really jovial, and then there's a couple that are going through something, let's say. Yeah. I painted sad things for a long time. So I feel like I'm painting either kind of very happy figures. I mean, there's something so wonderful about the sheer quantity of work that you make, Daniel. Like there's a repetition and in the images that you're using that makes it, you know, it's so pleasing to see right now a table like covered in these stacks of images that all speak to each other. They're all connected. Each one is kind of riffing off the last one.
Yeah,
so
definitely,
it winds up being like a composition altogether. Yeah.
Now, a lot of these ones are just started with a mark. I don't necessarily know where it's going. So it's kind of it's just like making a mark and then making some kind of judgment or another mark on top of that in response to what's there, and kind of building up some kind of figurative form. Or not.
And do the materials that you're using, do they really influence the marks that you make, or do you find that you have a mark and you make it anywhere?
I think so. I'm not great with expensive materials. Again, I think it comes to a boundary thing. Like it if I start worrying about the cost about something, I just feel like I can't be as free and experiment as much with it. So working on, working on computer paper is another favorite of mine, because I can just fold it into kind of like, well, you have 8 pieces on one side, so I'll fold it in half again, and then fold it in half again. And then I'm kind of left with this little booklet that can easily fit in my pocket. And just kind of draw. Oftentimes I will draw on both sides. So I have stacks, like I have so many of these at home as well, just kind of thousands of these. I used to work at the National Gallery in London. So I would have one of these in my pocket kind of all day. And just like every so often, like draw in front of a painting or draw the visitors or draw whatever I wanted. But
do you feel like you flush through an idea while you do that? Like, do you feel like you hone in on something eventually as you do more and more? Like not intentionally, you just start to hone in on something?
Yes, sometimes. Yeah.
No, it's interesting to hear you talk about not wanting to have, boundaries and just be really free, but there is like a really distinct
definitely
voice coming through that
definitely
is, no matter, how large in scale you're working, there's these characters, there's these colors, there's a voice coming through that's
definitely
so clear.
And I think that's from just drawing so much. I've kind of developed this kind of certain kind of painting vocabulary, drawing vocabulary, and I certainly have this kind of iconography, my own kind of personal iconography that I'm kind of drawn to, and that kind of use now.
Yeah, I like that you use that word because they do have the feeling of like mythos about them. Like it feels like there's a whole, big group of stories about these characters that they come with knowledge and myth and powers,
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. Norma Jean, do you want to speak a little bit about your process? What is it like when you go to create?
I feel like it changes for me as well, depending on what I'm working on. Sometimes I've put, like I said, I've developed processes depending on where I'm working too. Like I've been on residencies where I really felt like I didn't have to think about anything else other than creating stuff. So I felt like I could produce more. So I was making a lot of drawings as well, and sort of started with more of a free range on what I was doing, and started to, as I did more and more, it kind of became clear what I wanted. So I usually started with drawings and then worked my way to a painting. And I feel like that was a process of building images to get to a final. In that case, I was doing a lot of charcoal drawings, but it was all about the same gesture again and again and again. And so then when it got time to the painting, it was like a one-shot deal and just that one gesture again. And that was a process I built kind of for just those paintings and those drawings. And then other times I'm using actual photography images or quick snaps to then build an image. And to save on materials, I've done a lot of prepping on my, I'll paint on the computer. I'll just do up my images on the computer. That way you can practice colors, you can practice composition, you can, I have a lot of images on there. So
that's really cool.
I built a lot of images using just Photoshop, I guess, essentially. And then from there, it works its way into a physical study and then a painting, or sometimes not a physical study, sometimes straight to a painting. It saves so much room, so much time, and so much money for me. So I just have developed those kinds of processes too.
Would you share a little bit about the materials that you use once you're off the computer?
Once I'm off the computer, I'll use charcoal often, or just penciled sketches, and then I'll use usually just quick oil studies has been in the past, just so I know exactly what mixes I'm doing. I've gotten more and more disciplined about recording the mixes I'm painting with, and I've made color-coded little swatches so that I know exactly what mix I want. So I'm not racking my brain and muddying up. It doesn't waste as much paint. So I just look at my swatches and be like, I want that one and that one and that one, and mix them up because I have the recipe right beside it.
And with the recipe, are you measuring your paint?
No, it's not a science, but I'll try to do only 2 colors mixed.
Right.
So it's just, my swatches go this is the alizarin crimson swatch, and it'll be mixed with every color in my palette, but just that one color, and then titanium white twice to white it out even more. And then that's that swatch, and then I'll do my cobalt blue swatch, and it's mixed with every color. And
so it's kind of similar to how I'm thinking of potters, how they do their glaze tests.
Yeah, it's my version of that.
Yeah.
And I found that helped me so much to expand my palette, because up until that point I was kind of leaning on the same mixes again and again and not venturing out and using other pigments. I was noticing I was replacing, I don't know, certain paints more often than others. I was I haven't even used this, and what can I mix it with to get the color I want? So I just kind of sat down and made my swatches, which is also very therapeutic, just to mix paint and make your swatches. It's very nice.
And then for substrates, are you usually working on, I know you've done a lot of work on panel and wood panel. Do you kind of go back and forth with canvas or?
I've done a lot of panel, and I went to panel because it just soaks up less paint. It was like practical. I could slather that paint on and move it around and use less, but still get like effects I wanted. But canvas has lots of textures you can't get with a panel. So I do both. And I've found like panels, big panels are a nightmare to move, big canvases, you can roll them. So yeah, I do both. Right now I do a lot of panels still though. Yeah.
And are you building them yourself or is that a part of the process?
I've started using signboard. So shiny paint that makes signs in Montague, I think. I think they're Montague based. It's like a couple that hand paints signs. And I got a hold of a couple of the boards they use because I mean those signs go outside, so it's like that could weather anything. Like it shouldn't warp. So it's just thick plywood with a coat over top, like a priming coat, which I've been using a lot. So we'll see how they age from a conservation standpoint. But as far as I'm concerned, they work just fine and they hang nice and straight and they're super fast. You don't need a carpenter to build your frame. You just get it cut to size and you're ready to go.
Yeah, that sounds ideal.
You don't even have to prime it.
Yeah, it's ready to use. Yeah, that sounds really ideal. Yeah. I wanted to ask you both if you have a favorite project you've done to date or even a favorite subject or idea, like something that you're like, oh, this is still juicy. This still makes me happy when I think about it or still brings you inspiration.
My favorite project is probably kind of the whole body of work in itself. How should I say this? Yeah, it wouldn't be necessarily one kind of thing. I couldn't ever pick something out from kind of the body of work and think that was maybe the strongest idea. I think it would have to be kind of the whole body of work in itself, in a way. And that it's still kind of going. I guess there's a little bit of resilience there, even though a lot of it is kind of could be a lot of failures there, but I'm still going, so I feel good about that.
What does that mean? Like what would make an artwork a failure in your mind?
That's always kind of shifting as well. I feel like I might think something looks awful and failed, and then come back to the next day and it's completely fine. Or I might think something's a huge success and then come back to it a few months later and realize, no, it wasn't. And it's still kind of always shifting.
Yeah, no, I think we've all been there with our work where, the moment changes and then the way you see it changes and it can be revived or might need to be, put out to pasture.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And context is so important too.
Yeah. Yeah. Norma Jean, do you have a favorite or something that you're still working through that's bringing you inspiration?
I feel like I've really enjoyed that process I described with the gesture. I really enjoyed, but I did a project 2 years ago that started off as installation, the 49 stakes installation at Art in the Open. And
maybe you could describe that a little bit.
Yeah, it was a sort of like a, well, what it was literally was 49 stakes cut from 2x4s, painted to the specifics of like my father's description, who had passed away at the first of that year. And he had described to me how he used to make the stakes. He was describing how he had wished he had made the ones for that coming winter. And I kind of took that in, and then I decided to make the same number he has made, but made them specific to how he had wanted them made. And so it was like a therapeutic, it was very cathartic, because I used all his tools, I did it all where he was, and made it exactly the way he had wanted them to look. So at the time, it still is kind of emotional, but at the time it was really emotional, and I kind of let it sit. I installed them. I was happy with how it looked, and I was really happy with, it was one of the only projects where I knew exactly what I needed to do, what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to look like, and it did all those things for me, and it felt really, it was like a sort of like a whole, it was all sort of for him, but it felt for me too. And so after I've looked at them, the photos more recently, then I started to get into like, how can I, because I wasn't quite finished with the project, so I'm still interested in that project, why I did it. I'm kind of more ready to explore why I did it and what else I could get out of it, because I feel like that project still has some potential in painting. I feel like I could spend more time with it. It's because painting's so personal, and I feel like it was personal to be doing it, but I feel like I could spend more time just exploring why I did that, or what that reaction was, how I was so sure about that, but I, sure I wanted to do it. So that's the specific project I'm working on right now that I'm excited
It was a
about.
powerful one as a viewer as well. It was powerful to experience it and
I was hoping it would be like a
it,
visual, and like you can walk through and stuff. So I was hoping like even if people didn't know the specific background, they could still enjoy it.
Yeah, it was visually interesting, but also reading the description about it was really powerful.
So that's probably my most to date.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you both, what are some of the challenges and opportunities, if you want to touch on both of those, of working in painting in PEI in Canada in this day and age? Like, what are some of the things that are great about it, and what are some of the things that are challenging about it? I know painting is one of those things. When you tell anyone that you're an artist, they say, "Oh, you paint, right?
Painter,
You paint," and then it's like, "What do you paint?" And I feel like for both of you, your quote unquote subject matter is a little challenging to describe, and without actually showing somebody the work. Yeah. So what are the things you run into?
For the island, coming back here. After 14 years last September, I've almost been back a year now already, which is hard to believe. But what I've known, and I've really enjoyed, this really nice sense of community here now. And I think there's so much happening that I wish had been happening back in the day, and probably would have kept me here. Like, this town is small, there's a place like the Vessel, there's Out in the Open. It just seems like there's so much more happening here, and so many opportunities like this, and more places to show at as well, just besides the guilds or the Confederation Center. You have receivers now, you have the farmers market, and I feel like it's only going to kind of grow and get better here. So I see a lot of potential, and I'm really excited to be an artist based here again and kind of be part of this community. And
that's so nice to hear. Yeah, we're happy to have you back.
Yeah, I feel like PEI has really, I feel like there's this whole wave of people coming back even now, like I've noticed. And maybe that's with the specific circumstances that have unfolded this year, but I've noticed a lot of artists are coming back, and they're sticking around, and they're really making the practice based here. And so I feel like PEI is exactly the spot I want to be. I've never really lived anywhere else where I was, aside from art school. I guess I was focusing on being an artist, but I feel like that's a whole other part of your life while you're learning, or in that structured environment. But other times I've lived elsewhere, I haven't really set up an art practice, so this just feels like the right spot for me, and always has. And then painting specifically, what was the...
I was just asking, what are the challenges around being a painter, and do you find it, is it easy to find opportunities? Is it easier than other media?
I feel like it's easy to be able to just sit down and find a space and make work. I find paintings really, like, if you want to be producing work, you can just, I find, like, you create a space, you can do it, versus other mediums that might need more of a setup, more space, things like that. And then as far as a difficulty with painting, I'm sure there's tons I'm not thinking of right now. But overall, I've always found painting pretty positive experience. Yeah. It is what people assume any artist is doing.
Yeah.
And it is hard to explain if you're not doing what that person's got in mind when they think of
Right.
a painter.
If it's not the lighthouse that they have in their,
Yeah,
in their
that's
mind.
difficult. And then I'm sure any artist in any medium just has a hard time if they're not a painter, then getting to that next level of like, oh, I'm a sound artist or I'm a
Yeah.
performance artist, and then. But it's always hard to explain just cold open on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But.
I feel like technology too, even though I don't take full advantage of it, allows you kind of to be an artist anywhere. Through Instagram. You don't have to be kind of in a large urban center anymore for people to see your work. I think there's lots of interesting things happening now, kind of local, kind of community levels that might not be happening in like larger urban centers at the moment.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point.
I would say one challenge, I think, but I think it's getting much better, is getting your work or your ideas beyond like PEI and then beyond the Maritimes is still a hurdle, I think, personally. But I mean, there are groups out there, like there are artist front centers that are always putting out submissions and stuff, or calls for submissions. So, I mean, it's not completely impossible, but it is probably a bit of a hurdle for me personally to like get out beyond. But it is such a great community here, and I think everybody is building their little communities, and hopefully.
I find people really support each other
very
here,
much so.
and there's so many friends' houses that I visit, and your work is on the walls. So clearly, the community is supporting.
No, that definitely
what
is
you're
such a
making.
good community here, and a lot of artists have moved home in the past few years, and that's why.
And it's just a matter of time until people start going, like, look over and what is going on over there on
Yeah,
PI?
I
Something
know.
Yeah.
really
If we just
cool.
keep making it, I feel
Something
Yeah.
really cool is going on over there.
Yeah, well, and hopefully things like this podcast, once it's out in the interwebs.
Yeah, I guess that's the technology expands.
Yeah,
your
it gets
reach a bit.
people attracted to it.
Yeah.
We did talk a little bit before we started about monetizing your work, and I said I wasn't going to ask about that, but I am actually curious. When you are making paintings, you have a thing at the end of it. You have a physical object. Is it important to you to show that or sell that, or is that a part of the process? Like, some people will say the work's not done until someone sees it or someone hears it, that kind of thing. Is the audience relevant to your work, or are you making it to make it, and if someone sees it, great. If not, doesn't matter.
I don't think I personally can think too much about it. Like, I'm going to make it regardless, I guess. But also the audience is important, and I do want it to be seen. But I feel like I am not stage fright. But if I'm thinking too much about, or if I'm already planning who's going to see it, it might affect how I'm going to make it in a different way. It's not perfectly worded. I'm not perfectly describing that. It definitely doesn't matter if I sell it. Like, that definitely doesn't matter, which is unfortunate probably for a number of other things that I'll need in my life. But but an audience is nice to have, but a lot of times I'll be making work and I just know I need to make it and then worry about the audience after. A lot of times. Other times it's very much like the performances are obviously very much about them being experienced and seen. So it's a combination, I guess.
Do you have paintings that no one has ever seen?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely have ones in the works. Although things like Instagram then do eventually get them seen, just not in person. So a lot of times they probably do get seen. There's more that have been seen than not seen, that's for sure.
Do you run into storage problems?
Yes, and that's why I've had to downsize. The size I was working in when I had all these big studios to work in were amazing, and I loved it. And now they're all sitting in my mother's living room and my childhood bedroom. Like, her house is half paintings leaning against the wall, and I feel terrible. And so that's why I've stopped painting that large. It's just not.
So there'll be smaller paintings leaning
smaller
against
paintings
your
leaning in my house I'm living in right now is filled with smaller paintings that are leaning against the wall, which is much more manageable.
Yeah, definitely. I think even for myself, like when I was living in London, not having access to really large studio space, having to work from a desk at home, completely reduced my scale down to,
like these bookmarks that you showed us.
Bookmarks.
Yeah.
So I'm quite happy working at that scale. Now being back at the vessel, I have a little more space there, so I'm just kind of expanding things to kind of larger sizes, working on larger sheets of paper that I was given. I don't know necessarily if it's something that's necessary, but it feels like I have to kind of do it at the moment to kind of upscale some of these drawings, because a lot of times I was kind of thinking eventually, okay, I will be in a larger space. I can work from the smaller drawing and make larger paintings from it. The problem is when I go larger, it's not exactly the same. And I got to be cool with that, because it's impossible to get it the same, especially when it's maybe working with different materials. Like say if these were drawn with ballpoint pen on paper, I'm not going to get the same effect from...
And the gesture is so different when it's larger.
So in a way, the larger drawings have to become a little more kind of performances of the smaller drawings. That's what I feel like they're kind of becoming. So I'll use that as a reference point. But a lot of the materials, the brush or whatever I'm using this long kind of like needle pin at the moment to kind of put paint on. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I think it's some kind of sewing needle or something found in my house. But what I love about it is, again, it doesn't allow my gestures to kind of get too kind of fluid or too pretty. It keeps things kind of crude, raw. It's when I'm painting on, depending on the surface, it's additive but subtractive at the same time. So I'm putting it on but kind of scratching it off at the same time. And it gives a really kind of quality line that I'm happy with. It's kind of like ballpoint pen on kind of paper-ish.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I was asking about audience or sales, is that relevant to your work at all?
I'm quite happy with...
Doesn't matter if anybody sees it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happier, and I think I'm in a position at the moment now where I'd like more people to see what I've been doing. I'm okay with that. But at the same time, it's okay if no one ever sees the drawings. I know myself, I will see them, and my partner always sees them. So that's probably, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and it does speak to like the freedom you were talking about. That's really important in your practice. That does really leave it really open for, you can make anything.
Yeah.
And
I think if I was thinking about an audience too much, I might start editing things out too.
Or censoring.
Censoring myself too.
Yeah, it's always an interesting thing to think about, because I think there is the expectation when you work as an artist that you will show your work to someone, that you will, expose the world to it at some point. But it really isn't integral to the practice.
No.
Yeah. Unless you're performing. And
in that case, maybe more so.
Although there's also some interesting performance artists who are making stuff in isolation where it's not about anyone seeing it.
Yeah, the process of doing it and doing it, whether someone sees it or not, is still...
Yeah.
I think that's what's really nice too, is working at the vessel, is you do kind of always have your built-in audience of like the maybe 7 or 8 other artists working in there. And sometimes that can be enough as well. Yeah,
that's the beauty of a shared studio space.
Definitely.
I wanted to ask is there anything that you would share to someone who is like just starting in this game, in the work of being an artist, or something that you wish someone had said to you when you were getting started? Any words of wisdom to share? Wow. No pressure.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I feel like some of the things that I think now I would only have gotten to if I'd gone through the steps that I did. Like, that's a great question. Some things I feel like there's no way to shortcut it. You need to take the time to figure out like your own way of doing things. Like everything's, or to me, it feels like things are very individual. How you
absolutely.
decide to.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a lot of universal.
I mean, that right there is a helpful tip.
I guess,
though,
be okay with if
Yeah.
you're not doing something the exact way a few people around you are doing it. That's probably a good sign,
Yeah.
actually.
Or even the way you were taught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Don't bother.
Don't bother with that at all.
No, don't stick to that. Oh, God, no. Yeah, a lot of things, it's like I had to go through the process of learning it in that academic environment and then kind of like unlearn it, the right things I had to unlearn and keep the things like so. And that's just my individual, like, I went to art school. You don't have to necessarily go to art school. So it's so individual. I don't know if I could give advice that would be helpful to a broad audience.
I think that is helpful advice, though, like to trust that individuality, you know, like that. Well, and I think about your work and like you do really trust the things that you're drawn to. And as a result, the work has a lot of power and a lot of draw.
Yeah.
Even though if you were to allow yourself to be influenced by someone saying like, what's so interesting about a pile of snow and you didn't make the work, then yeah.
It's like take everybody's advice. Take my advice right now with just like choose, like listen to it, but don't necessarily follow. Like anytime there was a critique or I've had discussions with other artists, it's like I'll ask for their advice and then I'll just tell them I may not use any of this, but I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
Daniel, is there anything you would like to share with someone listening who's like, I want to be an artist too. How do I do it?
Well, I'm still trying to figure that out myself a lot of times. So I think it's be prepared to constantly learn and unlearn. But that's exciting because it is kind of a wonderful journey to be on. So it's going to go up and down. I would advise go with your own instincts and kind of trust your intuitions. I would keep things personal as well. And I wouldn't be too worried about kind of painterly or any kind of artistic fashions as well. Like just be kind of authentic, your authentic self, I think is very important.
Yeah, that's really sage. Not following the fashions, I think, is really key because they change all the time.
It changes all the time.
And your authentic self might not come through in that at all. Yeah.
This is good to have a chat. I feel like I miss these talks.
Yeah.
Art-based talks.
Yeah.
Gets your head.
Well, it's nice to go a little deeper on a specific medium too. That's
I feel like every once in a while I should just sit down and answer these questions anyway, just to see what or some of these questions anyway.
Thank you so much for like agreeing to do this.
Thank you for having us.
I'm really happy to talk with you both today. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of our community. For more information about This Town is Small and the work that we do, as well as our current programming, please go to our website, thistownisSmall.com, or follow us on social media, on Instagram at This Town is Small PEI, and on Facebook at This Town is Small.